Camden High is one of those iconic buildings, and the people of this neighborhood, they were very much attached to this building, not just because of its architecture, but because of all the experiences, the positive experiences that they had within that building.
I have 4 sons. 3 of my sons graduated there. My last one graduated in 2017. People don't realize how much that traumatized kids. And when my son graduated, he's like, I'm glad I'm the last class that gets to march in this school. But at the same time, he's like, I have nothing left of my school that I went to.
My children went to the school. My brothers and sisters went to the school. I wanted my grandchildren to go. The stories that came out of the school will one day be lost, because once the school is gone, it will one day be forgotten. 10, 20, 30 years from now, no one will ever think of Camden High School again.
This construction site is where Camden High School stood for a century. It was an imposing building known as the Castle on the Hill. It produced generations of leaders and cherished memories. Despite strong local opposition, Camden High was demolished in 2018 to make way for a new campus of smaller buildings. Each year, New Jersey loses tangible connections to its past through the neglect and demolition of historic structures. Frequently, preservation activists find it difficult to rally support beyond their local communities. In an effort to draw attention to these historic resources, Preservation New Jersey started its 10 most endangered historic places in New Jersey list 25 years ago.
The National Trust for Historic Preservation had for years had a list of most endangered sites that they published every year. So we saw all the attention that got, so we decided to do it ourselves.
Every year we announce the 10 most down in Trenton, usually on the steps of the State House. We've really found in the last few years with the wonders of social media that we're able to get the word out quicker and better, more effective than we ever used to.
The 10 most list gets statewide and even broader regional New York City, Philadelphia exposure. It gets publicity beyond just your local context, and it gets people interested. We get calls all the time about what's going on with that structure, how can I help? And we can hook up our local grassroots with some people maybe outside who have funding or have some knowledge or some type of expertise that can help these people.
In 2017, as the debate over the future of Camden High intensified, local activists gained broader support when Preservation New Jersey added the school to its annual 10 most endangered list.
So when Preservation New Jersey put our school on the 10 most endangered list, this gave credence to what we were saying. They're saying someone other than Doris thinks this school is valuable. This is when I think the uproar from the community became so much greater, because they now knew that it wasn't just the little town girl saying it. It was a bigger community that was saying, save this school.
When Camden High first made top 10 of the list, it went around New Jersey about the type of school it was. It drew a lot of attention and a lot of traction, and people were very concerned about it.
The advocates for Camden High School were amazing. They were very enthusiastic. They were all from the community. They came to the press conference with signs and spoke on behalf of the school and of their strong emotional connection to the school.
We did barbecues, rallies, programs, and even kids going away to college who done graduated. That's one of their first things, coming back to help Camden, because they felt that bond, that need, and that love. And that's one of the things you don't want to lose in your community.
Ultimately, the effort to preserve Camden High was cut short by the state government's decision to build new instead, citing the cost of restoring the building and bringing it up to code. Some Camden residents reluctantly backed the demolition plan because of the building's legacy of neglect.
This was an extremely awkward position. Being an executive director of a historical society, our classic role is, how do we save the building? It really comes down to the inequality of our entire system for school funding. If they had the money to maintain that school, we wouldn't be in the position we are right now.
Losing the preservation battle to others from outside the community means a connection to local history has been lost forever.
As they proceed with the gentrification of the city, what they're doing in all angles is erasing the identity of the current community. What becomes of the success stories, the doctors, the lawyers, the politicians, the teachers, the preachers? Most of them came out of Camden High School. It erases your past, and people without a past are lost.
The structures have stories. Maybe that structure is 200 years old, but there might be a story about a social movement that happened in the 1950s. If you lose that structure, a plaque is great, but the structure is what tells the story.
Romer Shoal Light is a working aid to navigation. It's part of the Coast Guard mission. During the late 1800s, there was a huge rollout of lighthouses up and down the eastern seaboard. They're called spark plug lighthouses. Ours was a training light. It was on land, and they used it to train lighthouse keepers. In 1898, they moved it out to Romer Shoal. For years, ships at sea before GPS steered at the light. It marks the entrance to New York Harbor. We acquired the light about a year before Hurricane Sandy hit. We were going to go around and raise money to paint and put new windows in, a lot like many preservation projects do. Minor structural, but we figured over time we could handle the big pieces. Then, out of the blue, Hurricane Sandy hit.
Superstorm Sandy battered Romer Shoal Light with a combination of wind and rising water levels powerful enough to rip other lighthouses from their moorings.
The water at that level came up 22 feet up to the third floor of the lighthouse. This light survived because all the doors and windows blew out and depressurized the light so water flowed through it. It literally scrubbed the inside clean as if someone had washing machine rocks around inside. Every piece of off brick was taken down and pushed out the windows or slammed down into the stairways. The light sits on a caisson, which is a cast iron tube that goes down into the mud, and all the pieces were down on the rocks or in the water around the now destroyed jetty that was no longer protecting the light. The light was fundamentally and structurally destroyed. After it got damaged by Sandy and I saw it, I just started reaching out. I don't mind telling you that seeing our name on the 10 most endangered list was a surprise. It got us really interesting attention. Everybody loves an endangered species or has a little place in their heart for an endangered species, and a lot of people helped. It's been a boon. It's been the wind at our backs for 3 or 4 years.
Romer Shoal remains on the list as endangered as the challenges posed by climate change require more than just physical renovation.
A big part of our future development plans is mitigation. Any money invested in our light has to be protected. How we dial down the incoming force of wind and waves and also keep the light safe as water levels rise is a really complex problem we're just beginning to get our hands on.
There are all sorts of natural disasters that can befall these structures beyond what we normally think of just neglect or straight up demolition because somebody wants to put a new condo there. Those are hard situations to deal with, and it really requires dedicated people to get through those disasters.
The house would most properly be called the Van Wagenen House because it was the Van Wagenens who lived here until the 1940s and actually built the house. However, the name Apple Tree House has been in common usage since at least the 1920s and refers to a meeting that the Marquis de Lafayette and George Washington had under an apple tree at the rear of this house, at least according to local legend.
By the 1950s, the Van Wagenen House had become a prominent Jersey City funeral home. The Quinn family owned it, and they'd been restoring the building to highlight its colonial connections rather than the building's later architectural features.
When the house was sold by the Quinn family, a bank had purchased it. The bank had proposed to knock the building down, and the community went into an uproar. So the legend actually helped to save the house.
There was a huge amount of community interest. This is a community, a really stable community where it seems like there are a lot of old timers here. Most of them remembered it as an important funeral home, but they also knew that there was important history that had happened here. I think in a lot of cases they weren't quite sure what it was, but they knew that there was important history that had happened here, and they were really proud of it. So they were really very happy to see something happen. When we first started working here, I don't know how many years the house had been vacant, but the front porch had already fallen off. Windows were broken, pigeons were living here, ceilings had collapsed.
As we came in and started to examine the house, we started to realize that we were either at a make it or break it point. We had to start something immediately.
The effort to fund several stages of restoration continued for 2 decades, and the 10 most endangered list helped jumpstart it.
When the Van Wagenen house hit that 10 most endangered list, it was an aha moment for everybody. When we were writing for grants and when we were asking for money, we were able to point to the fact that Preservation New Jersey had declared this one of New Jersey's most endangered sites.
Many preservation projects implement creative strategies to readapt older structures for active use, and restoring Apple Tree to be a community meeting space was a high priority.
People say, oh, it's going to be a museum, right? And you want to say, well, no, you don't really want it to be a museum. So we want to find a use that engages the public and brings the public into the house. People are here on a regular basis and that people are using the house just like it has since it was built.
Now we have this wonderful new chapter and so much opportunity to be able to engage with Jersey City, with the residents and with visitors. We have talks, we have scholarly programs, we have exhibitions, we have performances. I think it's important just to have a space for people to come together, to learn, to discuss, and to explore what it means to be from and of Jersey City.
Preservation New Jersey's 10 most endangered list is really a valuable tool to get buildings that are endangered out in front of the public every year to sort of let them know some of these buildings that sometimes are right in their own backyard, and they're not aware there's potential for these buildings to be restored. A lot of times I think people just think, well, it's an old building, it's too bad, but it's going. Who's going to find the money for that? When in fact sometimes there actually is money for it. And when there's a real effort, as there was here, to talk to the Historic Trust and the county funding agencies, that there really can be money to do this level of restoration and save these properties.
Awareness of these historic resources that are in some type of peril or some type of threat can lead to other towns reading about it and being like, hey, in my town, I have an issue like that too, or I have a threat to my historic building in my town as well. Preservation New Jersey, when we write letters and provide testimony at local land use boards, we're providing that credibility to local towns and community members who reach out to us for assistance.
When sites are nominated, the people who nominate them say that this will make a difference because it will give us some oomph behind our local advocacy to the municipal body or local press, whoever they feel they need to be addressing.
It takes a lot of time and energy to see a structure preserved and restored and then have its new story, its new life. And you just have to persevere because ultimately when it happens, it's so rewarding.